At Christmas, my son got a $5 gift card while his cousins opened iPads and designer sneakers. He whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" Then my dad said, "We reward the ones who matter." I picked up my son and we left. The next morning I cut them off from the mortgage and then. Every year I told myself I wouldn't do it again. Every year I still went. For the sake of keeping the peace, or whatever fragile version of it my family pretended existed. But that Christmas, that was the last one. And they made sure of it. My son Caleb is 8. Quiet, thoughtful, polite to a fault. He's the kind of kid who makes sure his friends get the bigger slice of cake. This year he spent 3 evenings working on handmade cards for his cousins. He even asked if I could print out family photos so he could glue them inside like little memories. He taped candy canes to each one and insisted we bring extra for anyone who might stop by. It was the sweetest thing. He was excited. That killed me later. We walked into my parents' house and it was chaos. Wrapping paper already scattered everywhere, wine glasses full, the oven beeping every few minutes. My brother and his wife were bragging about how exhausted they were from flying in first class. My sister was filming her twins' opening presents for her holiday vlog. The tree looked like something out of a high-end magazine. Or maybe a furniture store. Beautiful, cold, curated. Dad didn't even greet us. He pointed vaguely toward the coat rack without turning away from the TV. Caleb took his shoes off, hugged Grandma, and walked up to my dad to give him the card he made. He stood there while my dad took it without even looking, just tossed it on the coffee table and mumbled something like, "Thanks, bud." Then came the gifts. And the hierarchy. The twins went first. They each unwrapped custom sneakers, glittery tech accessories, and designer hoodies. My brother's son got a drone. His daughter, an iPad with a neon pink case. The room clapped like it was a talent show. Then someone passed a thin envelope to Caleb. No name on it. No decoration. He opened it, smiling politely, and just held it up to me. A $5 Dairy Queen gift card. That was it. He blinked and looked around. The clapping had stopped. No one really noticed. He leaned in and whispered, "Mom, did I do something wrong?" And then my dad said it. Not to anyone in particular, but loud enough. "We reward the ones who matter." There was a pause. Not long, just long enough for me to notice that no one flinched. My sister looked down at her phone. My brother sipped his drink. My mom glanced at me like I was being dramatic for even standing up. I didn't say a word. I picked up my son, grabbed our coats, and we walked out. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying it over and over. My son's face. The weight of that moment sitting on his small shoulders. I got up at 5 a.m., went downstairs, made coffee, and just sat staring at the backyard. And then I remembered my Aunt Naomi. She was the only one in my family who ever really saw me. She used to tell me stories about how my dad was the same way growing up. He always needed control. He'd weaponize affection, make you earn it, and move the goalposts once you did. When I started making good money, really good money, she warned me, "They'll act like you owe them, Jeannie. But it's not love. It's leverage. They'll take from you until there's nothing left but a thank you card and silence." What my parents didn't know was that for the past 4 years, I'd been quietly paying their mortgage. After Dad got into some financial trouble and Mom cried to me over the phone about the possibility of losing the house, I stepped in. It wasn't a loan. It was just easier than dealing with their mess. Every month I handled it. No questions asked. Until that morning. I pulled up the banking app, sent a final payment, and emailed the lender. I asked them to remove me from everything, effective immediately. No forwarding payments. No discussion. Just done. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. But I knew. This was the beginning of the end. And they were about to feel it. I didn't hear from them for 3 days. I figured the silence was intentional. Power move. They probably expected me to come crawling back, maybe with some long-winded explanation about why I overreacted or why Caleb was too sensitive. My parents loved that game. Create the problem, then punish you for not fixing it their way. But by the 4th day I got a text from my mom. Just one sentence. "Did you forget to pay the mortgage?" I stared at it for a few minutes. No greeting. No mention of Christmas. No asking how Caleb was. I left it on read. The next day she called. I let it ring. She left a voicemail, her voice clipped and high-pitched. "I don't know what's going on, Jeanette, but the bank said your auto payment was canceled. Your father is stressed. This isn't like you." That part made me laugh. This isn't like you. as if kindness and silence were my default settings. As if years of quietly helping them, covering their bills, sending groceries during the pandemic, none of that counted. Because I hadn't done this one thing. By day 6, the panic started seeping through. My dad texted me, "This is childish. You're hurting your mother." Then another. "You think you can just back out like that after everything we've done for you?" Everything they'd done for me. The irony nearly gave me whiplash. That night, I took Caleb to my Aunt Naomi's house. She lived in a small town about an hour away. The minute she opened the door, she pulled us in like we were precious cargo. Caleb lit up when she gave him a big bowl of ice cream and let him pick a Christmas movie. It was the first time I'd seen him really smile since the incident. Naomi didn't ask questions right away. She just let me talk. I told her everything. From the moment we walked into that house, to the gift card, to the silence that followed. When I finished, she just shook her head. "I told you, Jeannie. They only call you family when they need a lifeline." Then she asked the question I hadn't wanted to ask myself. What happens now? That's when I realized how far this could go. Because it wasn't just about the money. It never had been. My dad hated when things slipped out of his grip. And I had just pulled the one thread that held his whole world together. 2 days later, my sister called me out of nowhere. She never called unless it was to borrow something or show off. But this time her voice was tense. "Have you heard from Mom and Dad? They're freaking out. The bank sent a notice. Dad tried to call your job to clarify things." I nearly dropped my phone. "He what?" Apparently he'd called my office, said he was my emergency contact, and asked to speak to HR. He told them I was having a mental health episode, and that someone needed to intervene. My boss forwarded me the message. "Jeanette, do you need help at home? Please reach out if something's going on." I was stunned. That was their move. Sabotage? I called Naomi that night and told her everything. She didn't even hesitate. Cut them off. Fully. Not just the money. Block their numbers. Change your locks if you have to. You've given them enough rope and now they're trying to hang you with it. And she was right. That was the night I deleted every contact. My parents. My sister. My brother. Gone. I changed my number the next morning. And I told Caleb we were starting fresh. He asked if that meant we were alone. I told him no. Not alone. Just finally free. What I didn't know yet, not then, was that cutting them off would be the easy part. What came next was when the real fight began. The first sign they weren't done came in the mail. A thick white envelope with no return address showed up 2 weeks after I changed my number. I opened it thinking it might be from Caleb's school. Instead, it was a letter from my parents. Handwritten front and back in my mother's tight cursive. It started off with guilt, moved into threats, and ended with a thinly veiled demand that I fix the mess I'd made. My dad had apparently gone to the bank twice trying to renegotiate the mortgage, only to find out he wasn't even legally on the account anymore. They were stunned to learn that I'd removed myself entirely. No more backups. No more safety net. He was furious. She said he was losing sleep, and that I was being cruel over a misunderstanding. She asked how I could do that to my own father. I read it twice, then tossed it in the shredder. But I knew that wasn't going to be the last attempt. The second move was sneakier. Caleb came home from school with a flyer tucked in his backpack. It was for a community family picnic, being hosted by the church my parents occasionally attended when they needed to look good for the neighborhood. At the bottom in small letters it said, "All families welcome. Reconnect. Forgive. Rebuild." I didn't think much of it until Caleb told me someone had handed it to him directly. Not a teacher. Not a student. A woman who said she knew Grandma. That's when I realized they weren't just trying to get to me. They were trying to reach him. I called the school the next morning and filed a complaint. They said they'd look into it, but there was no real protocol for this kind of thing. The damage was done. Caleb started asking questions again. Why are they mad at us? Are we ever going to see them again? Did I do something worse? I kept it simple. I told him sometimes people make bad choices, and until they learn to be kind, they don't get to be in our lives. He nodded, but I knew it wasn't enough. The real breaking point came the following weekend. We were at Naomi's house again. Caleb was helping her make cookies in the kitchen, and I stepped outside to take a work call. When I came back in, she was standing at the door, arms crossed, jaw tight. Someone's parked across the street. Been there for almost an hour. It was my dad's car. I didn't go out there. I didn't wave. I didn't do anything. Just watched him sit there, engine running, pretending to scroll on his phone. 10 minutes later he drove off. 2 days later, Naomi's mailbox was smashed in. We didn't catch him doing it. No cameras. But she didn't have enemies. No one knew where she lived except the family. It was small, dumb, juvenile, exactly his style. A move meant to provoke, not punish. That was the moment I felt something shift in me. For years I'd played the game, tolerated the manipulation, paid the bills, took the comments, endured the little slaps to the face disguised as jokes. But now they were reaching into Caleb's world. Now it was war. So I made it official. I went to the courthouse and filed a no-contact order. I documented everything. The financial cutoff, the attempted sabotage at work, the incident at school, the stalking, the vandalism. It wasn't bulletproof, but it was a paper trail. A signal. A boundary. Naomi helped me install cameras. Caleb started therapy. I started sleeping again. And for a little while things went quiet. No letters. No calls. No strange cars outside. Just silence. But I knew them. They didn't let go. They regrouped. And when they came back, they'd bring everything with them. It started with a stranger at my door. A woman in a pantsuit, clipboard in hand. She introduced herself as an investigator from Child Protective Services. Said they'd received an anonymous tip about neglect and possible emotional abuse. Caleb was in the living room watching cartoons. I asked her if she wanted to come in. She did. I let her talk. Let her look around. She was professional, but even she looked embarrassed after 10 minutes. She asked Caleb a few basic questions. He offered her a cookie he helped Naomi bake the night before. By the end of it, she handed me her card and said quietly, "You didn't hear this from me." But the complaint was long. And clearly personal. I nodded. I didn't have to guess. I knew exactly who sent it. But I didn't expect what came next. The investigator called me again 2 days later. She said, "Jeanette, did you know your parents tried to petition for emergency visitation?" I sat down on the kitchen floor. She explained they'd filed it through an old loophole in family law. Something about concern for the child's well-being in estranged parental situations. It was rare. Almost never granted. But it was real. They were trying to legally force their way back into Caleb's life. After everything, I called Naomi in shock. She was quiet for a second, then said, "They're spiraling. They're losing grip. People like them don't go quietly, they try to drag you under with them." We lawyered up. I hired someone Naomi recommended, a woman named Clara who had handled cases like this before. She was sharp, calm, and had no tolerance for manipulation. We went over everything. All the emails, the texts, the mortgage documents, the CPS visit, the school flyer, the vandalism. She shook her head and said, "We can win this. But they're not going to stop until they crash. Are you ready for that?" I said yes. But I didn't expect the crash to come so soon. 3 weeks before the hearing, my parents' house was listed online. Public foreclosure. The bank was done playing nice. My financial support had carried them longer than they realized, and now they were drowning. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I felt nothing. Just tired. But Naomi called me one night with something new. Something weird. "Did you know your mom called Uncle Wes?" I hadn't spoken to Uncle Wes in 10 years. He was our family's shadow. Quiet, reclusive, always lived 2 states away. But apparently my mother had called him in a panic, hoping he'd pressure me to reconsider and be reasonable. Instead, he told Naomi everything. How they'd spun a lie, told him I'd been brainwashed by my crazy aunt, said I was isolating Caleb and destroying the family. He didn't believe them, but he said something that chilled me. "Your father said, she forgets who built her. We can unbuild her just as fast." That night I checked my credit. 2 cards opened in my name. One of them maxed. My stomach dropped. I called Claire. We pulled everything. They'd used old paperwork. From the days I co-signed things, helped them apply for loans, back when I still believed they were just struggling and not strategic. We reported it. Fraud. Financial abuse. The whole thing. And that became the final nail. The court case shifted. CPS closed the complaint as unsubstantiated and retaliatory. The judge overseeing the emergency petition saw the fraud report and dismissed their request in 10 minutes flat. Clara looked at me after and said, "That's as close as you'll ever get to a courtroom slap in the face." We walked out. I held Caleb's hand all the way to the car. And for the first time in months, it felt like it might finally be over. But the ending still wasn't here. Not yet. Because just when I thought I'd seen it all, they did something I never saw coming. They apologized. It happened on a Wednesday. Rainy, gray, and quiet. One of those days that felt like nothing important could ever happen. Caleb was at school and I was working from home, finally catching up on things that had fallen apart during the months of chaos. Then there was a knock on the door. Not loud. Not aggressive. Is there? I checked the camera first like I always did now. And I froze. It was my mother. Not outside the gate, not standing across the street on my porch. Alone. No car in sight. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the intercom. Why are you here? She looked thinner. Hair unkempt. Umbrella shaking in her hand. She said she needed to talk. Said it wasn't about money. Said it wasn't about the house. I told her to leave. He didn't. She just stood there in the rain and said softly, "Your father's in the hospital." That was not the card I expected them to play. I didn't say anything. I waited. She told me he'd collapsed in a parking lot 2 nights before. Stress-related heart issue. Not fatal but serious. They'd been staying in a motel outside the city. They lost the house. My sister stopped answering their calls. My brother had cut them off after finding out what they did with my credit. He said, "We lost everything. We know it's our fault. We know." I still didn't open the door. She pulled a folded letter from her coat. Held it up to the camera. "It's not a trick. I just wanted to give you this." I waited for her to leave it and go. She did. I didn't touch it right away. Naomi came over that evening and we read it together. It was written by both of them. The handwriting switched halfway through. It wasn't eloquent. It wasn't poetic. But it was real. They didn't beg. They didn't excuse. They just said what I never expected them to say. "We're sorry. We were wrong. We hurt you. We hurt Caleb. And we are ashamed." They talked about things I thought they'd never acknowledge. The favoritism. The manipulation. The money. The way they made me feel small every time I got strong. They ended the letter saying they didn't expect forgiveness. But they hoped that one day Caleb would know they were trying to be better. And that if I ever wanted to talk, even if it was years from now, they'd be waiting. Naomi was quiet when we finished reading. Then she looked at me and said, "So, what now?" And for the first time in a long time I didn't know. Because this wasn't the script. This wasn't revenge or victory or silence. This was something new. And somehow, that scared me more. It took me a week before I made the call. I didn't rush it. I read their letter twice a day trying to catch even a flicker of manipulation. But it wasn't there. No blame. No guilt tripping. Just 2 people who finally hit bottom writing like they'd run out of games. I called the rehab center where my dad was staying. Confirmed it quietly. Then I picked Caleb up from school and told him we were going to see someone. He didn't say much at first. Just asked one question before we got out of the car. "Are they going to act fake again?" I said I didn't know. But I promised if they did we'd walk out. Inside, my dad looked nothing like the man I grew up with. He was pale, smaller, like life had finally weighed him down. My mom stood beside him. No makeup, no jewelry, just holding his hand. He didn't start with excuses. He said he used to think control was the same thing as love. That losing everything made him realize how wrong he was. My mom looked at Caleb and said, "You didn't deserve any of it." Not a bit. They didn't ask for forgiveness. They just sat with what they did. And for once that was enough. We didn't stay long. Caleb gave him a drawing. A stick figure version of himself, smiling beside a snowman. My dad cried. Not loudly. Not for show. Just tears that felt real. We left without hugs. No promises. Just space. That Christmas we stayed home. Naomi came over. Caleb opened a new bike and a box of Legos. But before all that, I gave him a little white envelope. Inside was a $5 Dairy Queen gift card. He looked confused. I smiled and told him that's to remind you. He asked, "Of what?" I said that you've always mattered. He nodded and put it in his treasure box like it was worth $1,000,000. Maybe it was.